Okay, so let's see how many people are. Just give us a couple of seconds as we go live on Facebook. Okay, we're live and we're gonna admit the rest of the folks. All right, go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Ashley, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We have what we think will be a very interesting program. We have the honor today of having Dustin Watkins, the Executive Director of Bittersweet Farms, with us. And he's going to tell us about Bittersweet and about, one model of care for folks with IDD that works for a lot of folks. And so I'm very interested to hear Dustin talk about the farm and the kinds of things that it offers. Dustin, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate being here with you all. Really appreciate what Together for Choice is doing to help further the mission to give everybody a choice in where they live and work. And also providing me an opportunity to do what I love best, and that's to talk about Bittersweet Farms. So I'm sure some of you have some familiarity, especially those who have been involved in agricultural models of support. But I wanted to give a kind of overall primer in what we do, bring you up to some of the relative history that we've had in terms of our growth over the last couple decades and where we're at today, and also kind of talk about some of the unique challenges that we have with our model and how we're trying to adapt accordingly. Wanted to start off with just kind of a little introduction of myself. I am, I'm not a family member. I kind of serendipitously ended up in this field. I grew up about 10 miles away from Bittersweet here in Northwest Ohio, knew very little about it, went off to college and got a psych degree, came back, and like a lot of people with psych degrees, didn't really know what I was gonna do with it. So as I was looking for a job that would fit that, I had some friends that did direct support at Bittersweet, and they just raved about it. And I decided to apply and just work there for the summer as a direct support professional and fell in love with it and everything about it. And the things I'm going to share with you today are, the very things that just really captured me, capture so many of the folks that we support and the people that work there. And I've had the pleasure of being able to kind of grow and develop at Bittersweet through the years. I've had my hand in most of our operations. I was the assistant executive director for 10 plus years. Many of you might know my predecessor, Vicki Obi-Hilty. And when she retired in 2017, I was fortunate enough to take the position of executive director. I'm also a BCBA, and that was an opportunity afforded to me through some collaborations here with our local Great Lakes Collaborative for Autism, and they funded because there weren't enough BCBAs in their arena in this location. So I've been able to use that experience in multiple ways and continue to use that in my role today. I'm going to share my screen here, so bear with me as I get everything set up. All right, does everybody see the actual presentation screen? All right, terrific. All right, so who are we? So we're a holistic service provider for adults and adolescents with autism. Our main campus is in White House, Ohio, and that is a suburb of Toledo. So we're in Northwest Ohio. And then we have satellite programs in Pemberville and Lima as well. So we're really in the Northwest Ohio corner along the I-75 corridor. The Lima program is situated farthest from us, and that takes about an hour and a half from our main campus in White House to get to Lima. In White House, we are situated on 80 acres, which we're very fortunate to have. Half of that is a wooded area that butts up right into our largest metro park. So we have this great benefit of having oak openings, this beautiful metro park that we can just hike right into. And as you'll hear from me, we really incorporate as much physical activity into our program as possible. So that's a great resource to have. The setting is beautiful, and it's just a really, really beautiful place. Our mission is to positively impact the lives of those with autism and those whose lives they touch, which includes obviously family members, but it also includes those of us, the staff, who, you know, we're all glued by our affection for the individuals we support and the relationships that we have. What do we do? I'm going to kind of get into more detail with this, but in a summary, we provide residential services for 42 adults at this point, and that's in our White House. And actually, I made a typo, that's in Pemberville, as well as White House. Adult day services are provided for approximately 85 adults in 2 settings, and that is in White House and Lima. Our largest day program is in White House. Adolescent transition for 11 students, and that's in Pemberville, and I'll talk more about that. We also have adolescent summer camp and extended school year services in White House and Pemberville. And then we do a community-based social recreation program for adolescents that is quite popular and has picked up through the years. Obviously, that's been impacted by the pandemic. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Who do we serve? Really, people from across the autism spectrum, teens through seniors. You know, we've got quite a few of our founding residents who are now in their 60s. I'm going to talk a little bit about the considerations with them and their supports as they age. But we also have new people coming into the program, adolescents entering into adulthood that participate in our adult services. Our niche and wheelhouses has been supporting those with high behavioral needs, especially those who have not been successful in other placements. Part of that is our approach and our philosophy. And I would have to say that a big part of that is also the setting and the freedom and the space and the actual benefit of, working in an agricultural farm-based model. So we'll talk more about that as well. We do provide medical services for our residents, particularly in our ICF, but also in community living as well, in our waiver setting. And right now we've got pretty typical to moderate needs, but those needs are increasing as our residents age. So we have to meet that call, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. We do have a pretty detailed admission process. We have an admissions committee because we really want to make sure that as we commit to providing services, that is, we take that commitment very seriously. So we look at, will the individual, benefit from our services? What are their support needs? Can we adequately meet them? And also, what is the ability to have some service compatibility with the other individuals in the program, in the home? And we work really closely with families, both in the admissions process and screening, as well as once they're in the program, because we really are a unified team. So, one of our big areas of focus is making sure we work well with the family. We have similar, outcomes and goals in mind. And so we take a little bit longer to go through that process. We do have a notable waiting list for most of our programs, but it's really important because it has ensured that we can meet people's needs and that we're not finding ourselves in a situation 6 months down the road where it's just untenable, as much as we can try to avoid that. And it is very rare that we have a situation where we say we can't serve somebody once they're in our program. Our business structure is somewhat maybe atypical. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We have an approximate operating budget of $6 million per year, and we are largely a Medicaid provider. We really don't do a whole lot of private pay. Most all of our individuals are funded through Medicaid in one way or another. We have 3 boards. We have an Inc. Board of Trustees, a pretty traditional board of trustees, but then we also have a Bittersweet Autism Foundation board. And they are the owners of our properties where we can't be the owner and the service provider. They also oversee fundraising and our investments. So they're there to support the Inc. board and keep our reserves of funding so that, if we have a need that wasn't budgeted, unexpected, we can go back to the foundation and request that money, and they are there in service to Inc. and making sure that we've got what we need. So it's a pretty good arrangement for us. And then we also have our BRK HUD board, and that is in our Betty Ruth K homes. And those are HCBS homes, but they are HUD homes. So they were built with HUD grant funding, and we have to have, accordingly, we need to have a separate board to manage that. So a little bit about our history. We were founded in 1983 by Betty Ruth K, who was a retired school teacher, special education teacher. And she was seeing that the students that she was teaching, she was doing great stuff within her classroom. And yet when her students entered adulthood, there were really no viable services that were appropriate for people with autism to go to. So they were kind of dropping back into sheltered workshop settings. And so she explored a lot of different models and was really taken with the Somerset Court program in England and decided to replicate that model here in the United States. So we were the first agricultural based program for individuals with autism in the United States. And now there are many more, which is great. We've had a lot of expansion through the years. I would say 1983 to 2000 was kind of, our startup period, so to speak. There wasn't a whole lot of growth. Things were a lot simpler. Regulation was a lot simpler. The rates of, incidents were, much less than they are today. And as we've seen the rates of autism go up, we were also trying to meet that call by growing our services. And so we've done quite a bit of expansion over the years from what Betty started. And this was, Vicky's charge during her time was really trying to meet the call of the number of people entering into adulthood that just didn't have any viable options. So we created our Bittersweet Lima program. Some of these were opportunities that came to us, and this is one where with Lima, we had a board member whose mother passed away, and she bequeathed her property to us in Lima. So this is an 88-acre piece of property. Most of it is field farmland, but it's got a great house on it, and it's got a barn that we've been able to use for day programming. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. The middle house, we're not the best at creatively naming things, but we call this the middle house because it was between our two existing houses in our ICF. So we were able to build that and really kind of take a lot of at one point we had 15 people living in our largest home. And so we were able to take half of those folks out, move them into the middle house, create more space for everybody. But this house is also ADA compliant. So we did that with the, understanding that the individuals were aging and we needed to make sure that they had a house that was suitable. Our administration building was built at the same time. This enabled us to get all of our, administrative staff out. We had offices all within the home before. So we had one very large house called the main house, and it had offices, it had 15 people. And so we were pretty tightly packed. So this administrative building has really helped us be able, as we grow and expand, house our administrative team, and it's our center of operations. The Bittersweet Pemberville program is twofold. We provide residential services there for a very small group of 4 individuals. And then we also have a school program there. So it's a very atypical thing. This used to be kind of a halfway house for juvenile delinquents. And it closed down. It was a vacant property. And so we seized upon that, really renovated it, and turned it into an adolescent transition program. I'll give more detail about that, but that program has been running strong for 14 years now, and we've had several graduates from that program. We have our BRK homes, which I spoke to. Those are our HUD homes. Those are two 6-person apartments. So they have their own apartment unit, but then we also have a common living area, common dining area, and common kitchen. So we kind of get the best of both worlds, and we're able to move around. We were able to move around when we built this from, in Ohio, the viewpoint of no more than 4 in any kind of living situation, because they all have their own apartment unit and their own respective address. We built our Palmer house, which was another waiver home, in 2015. And this was through a capital campaign as well as some parent investment. And that home is for 4 women exclusively. It's a women's home. And all 4 of those women also attend our day program, which is the case for most of our residents throughout our programs. These are built on adjacent properties. I'll kind of talk about the implications of that. A lot of our growth and development has really been based on timing and the fortune of doing things when we did it before rules change and regulations change, but I'll talk about that as well. And in response to, both needing to make sure that we always have viable, meaningful activities for our participants, as well as trying to offset some of our shortages when it comes to funding, we have, really dabbled and developed a lot of different micro enterprises over the last 20 years. Including, we've done art sales. We had a stint with animal husbandry. There's a reason we don't do that anymore, but, it was just a lot. There were days I was out there chasing sheep in my suit that had breached the fence and things like that. We still have an animal program, which I'll talk about, but we've done pesto and cookie sales, selling pesto in a commercial fashion. And we have our largest program, which is still thriving today, which is our community supported agriculture program, which has really been a kind of flagship operation for us. So our overall philosophy is what we call MAPS. And this is an acronym that, we take this concept and we try to embed it in our planning, in our activity completion, and our problem solving. So we use it in a lot of different ways, but it's kind of a checklist to make sure that we've incorporated this in everything that we're doing. So the M is for meaning and motivation. It's making sure that what we're doing is meaningful, that the participant understands the meaning behind it. And if they understand the meaning, then they're more motivated. So, i.e. we're not building widgets and just doing busy work for the sake of doing busy work. There is a purpose to it and a meaning behind it. And so we try to make sure that that is understood and that it's relayed in a way that the participant can digest and comprehend in the fullest capacity. The A is for aerobic and active engagement. So we try to get as much physical activity as possible in all things. We may do things in a less efficient manner if it means that we can increase the physical activity incorporated in it. So we try to, from doing straight up aerobics and getting exercise to just trying to make sure that we're doing a lot of, farm work, and the things that we offer provide a lot of bending, lifting, pushing, pulling, that kind of stuff that gives great, input on the OT levels and on, just the endorphins and all that stuff. So that's a really important piece of our philosophy. The partnership and purpose is really just, we do everything together. So we're at our best when you would look at a group of staff and participants and not really be able to tell who is staff and who is participant. So we have to do things together. It's not I have to do or you have to do, but we accomplish things together and, with a purpose in mind. And then the structure and support is really the foundation, and that's making that everything is structured through the day with a lot of the hallmarks of what we know people with autism need and thrive on in terms of, visual supports, communication supports. Those are all individualized to the person, as well as just having some, structure built into how we operate each day within our program. So that's kind of a quick overview of MAPS, but it's something that we teach our staff about on day one and that we keep on top of to make sure that it's not falling by the wayside in any aspect of what we do. I know that some of you have seen this. I wasn't aware of that. I'm sorry. So this may be a repeat for some of you, but this is a video that I thought was a nice review of kind of what we do, some of the people we support. This is on our website, so if you've seen it before, I apologize, but give some scope to our services and the impact.
The power of Bittersweet is really in relationships, the relationships that our staff have with our participants in meeting them where they're at and focusing on their capabilities and being able to nurture those capabilities and develop their skills together in partnership through meaningful activities that are inherently meaningful to the individuals and to what we do each day and contributing to the greater good. We're able to build and foster these skills through this process, which opens up new doorways and develops new skills throughout their entire life.
I love working with the adults in our program to hone their horticultural skills and gardening. We teach everything from seed to harvest. I've been working with Mike for 2.5 years, and it's been phenomenal to watch him grow.
I harvest kale, lettuce, tomatoes, potatoes. So I can learn about going in another community, job of one source of mowing.
He is so thrilled that the skills he's been working so hard on developing while he's at Bittersweet has enabled him to also share his skills and expertise outside of the farm.
In the Creative Arts Studio, we really try to hone in on and focus on people's interests. Rodney's made it really clear that his interest is Halloween, so we try to incorporate that as much of the tasks that we do here in the art studio. We also focus a lot on building people's independence, so some of the skills that Rodney does regularly are self-advocacy skills, communicating with other program participants and his co-workers, and also cleaning up and breaking down work areas. He also goes to the store to collect different art supplies we need for various projects. He comes with us to the Goodwill to look for frames to frame our art, so all sorts of things like that Rodney participates in.
When Dan Everett first started here, he hardly spoke at all, but you could tell he was like a sponge absorbing everything that was going on around him, and you could tell he was interested because his eyes would sparkle and light up, especially anything that we were doing out in the barn.
We get the eggs out of there, and we make baby chickens out of them. We hatch the eggs, and we get chickens out of them.
Being included and having a job that has meaning and provides a connection, a friendship, an understanding, and a feeling of belonging, and gives them a sense of self-worth.
Culinary is responsible for providing necessary items for our day program lunchroom, ordering, receiving, storing, and distributing the food in the facility, and producing cookies and brownies for sale to the public while maintaining and meeting all the federal, state, and local requirements of a commercial kitchen. Gino has worked in the culinary department for many years. He keeps it real with respect, helping first, learning and growing, his empathy, and achieving together.
An 80-acre farm, you cannot beat that type of a setting. There is space, there is clean air, there is camaraderie, there is working with your hands, there is the physical outgoing. It's just a beautiful setting, and it just brings out the natural feeling in people. And once they see all the things that are going on around them, they just want to be involved with that. They want to be a part of it. You never stop providing opportunities and encouraging them to participate with you, because the main philosophy of Bittersweet Farms is not to do for people, but to do alongside in partnership.
All right. Now I got to figure out how to get back. Okay. So, I think that gives a good glimpse of, especially the relationships. I think that's the most important part of that video that is the essence. That is the magic. That is where the success of our program comes from, is really the relationships that are formed. So I wanted to give you a little bit more detail about our residential services and kind of talk about this, because again, it's unique in the way that we do things, and we really could probably not replicate it today, given today's regulations. So our residential services are in White House and Pemberville, mainly in White House. We have a 20-bed ICF across 3 homes. That is also, we have 2 respite beds. So we have 20 beds plus 2 respite beds that we can use. Those 20 beds have pretty much been there from the beginning. Bittersweet was started as an ICF. It was pretty much the only viable option in 1983. And so that was, how we started. We have 22 people now served in HCBS waiver funded services in 2 6-unit apartment buildings. Those are the BRK homes, 2 4-person group homes, and 2 single apartments. Our ICF is located at the main campus, while our HCBS homes are on adjacent properties. In Pemberville, we have that group home, and then in downtown White House is where we have the single apartments, which we do not own. Those are just rented in a pretty traditional sense. Many of those living in our homes, our residents, were, founding participants, have been with us since the 80s and 90s. So in every sense of the word, they're really family. And as there have been efforts to look at downsizing ICFs and to see if individuals want to move out of our ICF, they don't choose to. If that's what they choose, we obviously would help facilitate that in every way possible. But they have grown up together. A lot of these participants and residents actually went to school together and then went to Bittersweet together and have been with one another for a very long time. The acceptance of our physical layout, like I said, has been really grandfathered over the years. So we've got an ICF, and on the same property, we've got our day program operations, which are, technically 500 plus feet away, but they are on the same property. And then on the adjacent property, we've got our BRK homes and then our Palmer house. And those are HCBS services. So we went through, remediation and prepared for heightened scrutiny. And I'm going to talk a lot about that. But we have been kind of given dispensation over the years as we, these rules were then created and we were already operating the way that we were operating. So we're thankful for that. But grandfathering only lasts as long as the person grandfathering it. And, we're always kind of, keeping our eye out for things to change on the legislative front. Our adult services, largest program we have in White House, approximately 70 individuals are served there in a typical day. That's changed a little bit with the pandemic, which I'll touch on as well. But 2/3 of that are residents. So not every resident that we serve attends our day program in part or full, but most of them do. Some choose to, supplement elsewhere, either some of the day or some of the week or full time. As you saw, our program areas include gardens, and that's where we do our community supported agriculture, creative arts, groundskeeping, animal care, culinary, nature's hands, which is essentially it's kind of doing a lot of earth-centered work, ecological work. So it's recycling, it's feeding the wildlife, it's taking care of our outdoor cats, it's using things found in nature to make crafts and that kind of thing. And then we've got a janitorial crew as well, and they work, helping clean our admin building and other spaces. And then we also have several community volunteer activities, including doggy daycare. You can see a picture there, and helping out at our local food bank and things like that. Our program is essentially tiered into 3 offerings. So when people first start with us, depending on what experiences they've had, we talk to them. What would you like to try? If they don't know, we'll kind of try them with everything. So we'll assign them with the staff, and we'll just dabble for a couple of weeks, spend a little bit of time here and there, and then we'll talk about what the individual likes, what they don't like, and we'll create almost like a school semester schedule. So we tend to operate within the seasons, and we have a split day. So we have our morning and our afternoon, and the individuals are assigned to an area. So they typically start with kind of a recreational or a habilitational focus first off. They're learning just the fundamentals. They may need to work on some of the prerequisite things. But as they hone those skills, then they get into an apprenticeship mode, which we call pre-vocational. And as those skills are mastered, then we start giving them more and more opportunities, more hours for work, compensable work, which also come with additional responsibilities so that we can acclimate what work in the broader community looks like and have as much of a seamless transition as possible. All individuals who get paid minimum wage. We used to do, time studies and adjusted wages, and we went away from that for a few different reasons. Mainly that it was kind of hard to maintain, and as different people did it, we would get different results, and we just kind of decided that it was better to move into this, minimum wage with this tiering of our program. The tiers also provide a safety net of support. So, many of the individuals will be fine for a long time, but when they go through a rough patch, it can be pretty rough. If we start to see some of the commitment or some of the skills slide, it's not that they lose their job or they go back to square one, but we can kind of use a scalpel and not a hatchet in terms of adjusting our program offerings. So maybe it's instead of 5 days a week in an area, maybe we're just going to drop to 4 days and work on some of these skills until they're back to baseline. And then, always kind of working in this capacity of just being able to meet individuals where they're at without being too much of a fall from, where they're at and, their diminished morale in effect. So, I think that's a really important part, and that's something that's not necessarily offered in the, typical community employment. And we see a lot of individuals who have just failed because as they get, they work through, the Bureau of, Vocational Rehab, they get job assignments, but they have a rough patch. There aren't great natural supports in place. They lose their job. And then the entire team is starting from square one in terms of what people need and what supports they need, finding another placement. And this, really helps us kind of keep things on track. Although we say, please try to commit to an area, we're very amenable if somebody is not liking an area. If they want more or less of something, we try to make that work. But as you can imagine, one of our challenges each day is 70 individuals in our program. Not all of them get along. Not all of them want to be in a certain area. Some of them need specific staff. So it's this kind of giant, math formula that we sometimes have to work out. What call-offs did we have today, just to make sure everybody's getting what they need. Obviously, our priority focus is on making sure that the individuals are content and getting, the services that they need and the supports they need. We also have a day program in Lima that's smaller. We've got 14 individuals right now and 5 staff. This program has been, we try to do as much, similar farm-based activities, agriculture. They have, chickens, as you can see, some rabbits, but more and more we're kind of getting out into the community, and this program is kind of the location is a hub. So during the pandemic, we've had to kind of go back to using the location more as a central area of activity. But they do a lot within the Lima community and have a lot of connections that, the community's just been great, welcome us and, form a lot of relationships as well. So it's really been a great program. It's grown and evolved through the years. It had some, bumps in the beginning and still has some now, but we've got our sea legs there, and, they've been able to operate because of how small it is. They've been able to operate within the restrictions of, the state of Ohio in terms of the pandemic. So pretty cool stuff going on there. The Adolescent Transition Program in Pemberville, we've got 11 students served with, they all get one-to-one support from a DSP. And then we have a full-time teacher there as well. So this is all done through contracts with local school districts. So these are students who typically are more behaviorally involved than the school district can handle. And so after attempting to meet their needs and failing, they look to us to see what we can do. And again, this is about 10 acres, so it's not as large as a setting as our other locations, but it's still enough to be able to get outside, and have some space. And our students really thrive in this as well, because that's one of the constraints that a lot of them have in a traditional school setting is there's just no flexibility in being able to get outside, get some, you know, physical activity, take a breather when things get too much. And we're able to provide that, as well as those one-to-one supports, you know, and those relationships in turn. One of the cool things, so we do extended school year over the summer. So most of our students stay with us throughout the summer, and we just continue on that educational path so they don't lose those skills and that learning over the summer. But the students also come out to Bittersweet and White House to the farm routinely. They're a couple times a week. And as they get closer to graduation, they come out more as we kind of figure out what is their plan for post you know, school and adulthood. Many of them come into our adult day program, not all, but it gives us a great opportunity to learn their needs, have them experiment and dabble in the different areas, build some skills. And we've had great success in having kind of a really smooth transition with our students into our adult day program. And even if they don't come into our day program, it gives us a lot to you know, offer when it comes to wherever they're going and helping them understand what the support needs are and what their capacities are. So this program, I think our count now is 12 graduations thus far. So small program, but pretty impactful, and something that definitely is in high demand with the school districts, especially. I think they see a great value to it and continue to work with us in good collaboration. We also have a social recreation program. And this is something that has grown, obviously has taken kind of a backseat during the pandemic, but we've been trying to emulate this through virtual platforms. So we're doing a lot of Zoom activities, delivering activity packets so that people have materials, and then we'll do a Zoom session to you know, keep this going. And this is really aimed at teens. It provides opportunities for interaction and skill development, but we use teen volunteers. So it's great for them to get, you know, for their resume and volunteer opportunities. But what we find is they really, really enjoy it. Some of those teens actually become our staff because they enjoy it so much. But they do a lot of different things. So in the community, you know, you can see here, they're at the art museum, bowling, photography. It's kind of like a multi-week session. So they'll sign up, and for this, you know, 6 to 8 weeks, we're doing a photography club. And so we'll learn about photography. We'll go and take pictures and, you know, use that as a vehicle for working on social interaction and relationship building. And, you know, this is becoming more in demand. I think we're seeing in some respects, not as much demand for residential services, still there, still significant. But we're seeing a lot more interest in some of these supplemental activities, particularly for those who aren't necessarily maybe ready to have their child move in to another home. And it's a great kind of supplement for families and for individuals. So this kind of brings us to our current challenges, which I'm going to touch on individually. But we've got workforce shortages. Any of you providing services, I assume you have workforce shortages as well. I'm going to talk about kind of how it impacts us and what we're doing with that. Ohio has got an interesting regulatory system. So there's some good things and some challenges, and I'll expand upon that. Funding limitations, obviously anybody who is providing Medicaid services is experiencing this, I would gather. The CMS settings rule, I'll talk about our experience with that and where we're at now. There are changing social norms, and with a program like ours and the model and philosophy we have, as these social norms change, we have to adapt. So I want to touch on that as well. I already talked about our aging of founding residents, but I really want to kind of dig into that a little bit, because that is our next big challenge on the horizon. It's already here, but it's going to be increasing. And then obviously the pandemic disruption and kind of how we're navigating through that. So the workforce shortage is our #1 issue. You know, our desired outcomes, you know, really depend on relationships. That's what it's all about. And so We have to make sure, there's a lot of reasons for the workforce shortage. I presume you guys understand a lot of those. We're also very determined not to just hire anybody. We still have a very thorough application process, interview process. We don't want a warm body. We want people who really buy into the program, buy into the philosophy, are not averse to physical activity, are not averse to some challenges, and can really appreciate all of the non-monetary rewards that come with working at Bittersweet and working with the people that we do. The same thing that grabbed me as a 22-year-old knucklehead and have kept me here for 22 years or for 20 years. We want to make sure we're kind of hitting that same target. What we get into is this compounding catch-22 as well, where turnover kind of just creates more potential turnover. We've got more difficulty in recruitment and training. We're getting more people who you set up 10 interviews and 3 of them will show up. That kind of stuff they call ghosting. We're just seeing that in society more. That's shared by our peers in the field, but it is a significant problem that is just compounding, especially as the baby boom generation continues to retire, still pulls from that same workforce if they need any kind of assisted care, and there aren't enough people to fill those spots. We've got managers who are filling in and working the floor when we don't have staff to work, which is obviously a challenge when it comes to making sure they can focus on what they need to focus on. And that can, ripple. I'm, as the only BCBA we have in the organization, I'm very involved in behavioral challenges and supports and working with the team, which is also an added benefit. I would say that that's a plus, and it gets me more involved as an exec than I think other execs might be. So we try to see the benefit in all these challenges as well. Culture has been the biggest factor for us, and trying to differentiate what our culture is. You heard Gina in the video reference keeping it real. That is a reference to our core values. So that's RHEAL, respect, helping first, empathy, achieving together, and learning and growing. And so we try to make sure that that is not just words on a page or on a wall that sound good, but we really incorporate that in everything, even our employee evals. That's pretty much what we focus on in our measures. So that has really attracted the right people, and it's repelled the wrong people. And I really think that it's easy to talk about it. Everybody probably has core values, but we've been very intentional about how we incorporate that into our operations. Wages are still important. We've been trying to maximize the starting wage for our DSPs for years. About a year ago, we upped ours from $10.50 to $12 an hour. We did not see a huge boom in applicants for our staff, but I think we would have seen continued shortages, growing shortages, if we wouldn't have made that move. We've got 2 Amazon fulfillment centers within 30 miles of us, 20 miles of us, that are starting people at $15 an hour. There's a lot more competition with the discussion of $15 being the new minimum wage. I think that's great. This is not entry-level work, but we're competing with other entry-level positions. But for us, we did the calculation, and to bump from 12 to 15 starting, it would cost us $1 million a year. So as a $6 million operation, that's quite a challenge. And I think we need to continue to incrementally get there. The discussions about $15 an hour minimum wage are great, but as I'm sure you'd agree, we need that to be reflected in our reimbursement and our funding if we're going to make that feasible. Otherwise, that's just going to add to our challenges. We also have realized that, we really need to provide a viable career path. And I use my story as, an example of, I started as a direct support professional, was able to, have a variety of beneficial experiences through that time. And now I'm fortunate enough to be the executive director. And I'm very proud of the fact that pretty much about 95% of our program leadership started as direct support. either with us or somewhere else. But I think it gives a very good foundation, and it gives you some credibility with your staff as well, so that you're not just talking the talk, but you're able to walk the walk and give some scope of reference. And this is our number one barrier to growth. So as I showed you on our timeline of expansion, we did a lot of capital growth. We did a lot of program expansion over the early 2000s and into the teens. At the same time, we've got a paradoxical shortage of staff that's growing. And so we kind of hit a crossroads, and our ability to grow right now is solely tied to staff more than anything. And we've got to get this addressed if we're able to meet the need out there that is just growing every year with more and more adults coming into the system. So all of these reasons make it the number one issue. I also referenced the fact that we support, people with behavioral challenges that haven't been successful elsewhere. But our ability to do that is hinged solely on our retention of the right staff, because those relationships take time. So we have to make sure we don't, cycle people through the onboarding and training so quickly that those relationships aren't formed, because the residents and participants will not do well with that, nor will the staff. And that's something that should take time. There are certain levels of support that a staff should not be providing until they've gotten, quite a bit of exposure and, experience under their belt.
Dustin, we have about 15 minutes left, so I think this is a good time to focus on the regulatory side. And we can stay extra time for those that would like to stay extra, but just wanted to give you a heads up.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Okay, thank you. So Ohio's regulatory system, we have a county board system. So yes, we have our Ohio Revised Code that dictates our rules under our Department of Developmental Disabilities, but they are then interpreted and enforced by the county boards. So we work in about 10 different county boards, and each of them interpret the rules differently. So we have to kind of be very nimble and very flexible between those different counties, because they're all working with the same playbook, just interpret them differently. And that can be a real challenge. So, one of the trends that has been happening is an increase on non-restriction, sometimes overlooking behavioral science and the needs of those with autism. So we have a unique program. There aren't a whole lot of programs that serve solely adults with autism in Ohio either. So we're operating under, this big umbrella of developmental disabilities, and we're going through more reform than ever. A lot of rule changes. But there's also been this focus on behavior as kind of being a bad thing. So 5 years ago, I was on our behavior support work group, meaning that we were revising the behavior support rule that kind of dictates what you can do in the name of behavior support. They were really focused on, their behavior has been managed for too long. They talked about some horror stories that were just not good. Nobody would sign off on, but they were a flaw in the oversight, not a picture of what everybody else is doing. And so the current mentality is it's very reactive, not proactive. So in the state of Ohio, you cannot provide any restriction unless it means that they're going to end up in the hospital or a fatality today. So for example, if you've got somebody who's got, some binge eating challenges, they eat 24 donuts in a setting and can get sick, and yet they don't tie that action to that outcome. We cannot prevent them from doing that. We cannot restrict the donuts. We cannot, because the school of thought is, does anybody stop you from eating 24 donuts if you want to? So that's kind of a very basic example of it, but it really kind of doesn't, in this case, is it ethical to allow somebody to become a brittle diabetic and then start restricting them? Whereas, we're not trying to over restrict. We're just trying to find ways that are, effective and supportive to help people. And for a lot of folks, having that external control is very comforting, because they know that if they have, unmitigated access, it's overwhelming, and they know that they can't control themselves. So again, each individual is their own entity, and we take a person-centered approach, but sometimes we don't always see eye to eye. And sometimes, even funding is very reactive. We've got frequent rule change. I talked about pendulum swinging. So, now that the new behavior support rule is up for revision, now they wanted to remove the word behavior from the behavior support rule because they thought behavior was a bad word, but comically decided that no one would be able to find the rule if they did that. So they left that in. And now, as they're talking about updating it, they're proposing that a BCBA should be on every human rights committee. So big pendulum swing. And, that's just par for the course. Our program and the needs I talked about are unique. Our model is unique. So we have to do a lot of state and local advocacy, which I think everybody has to do at this point. Funding limitations, the overall need and quality of our services extends beyond Medicaid funding. So we have to do fundraising. I'll talk about that briefly. Funding in our adult services program, the highest level of funding you can get for anybody, regardless of their needs, is 1 to 3. So 1 staff to 3 individuals. So there are people that we have to support 1-to-1. We know we take a loss on that, but we try to make sure that there is some compatibility and some give and take in the overall picture. And our goal is to try to get them off of a 1-to-1 support, but obviously there are going to be people who need that for the long haul. Funding assessments don't always accurately capture needs. So we've got a funding assessment designed for typical people within the DD population, not people with autism. And so, they don't always capture the true support needs, and they get underfunded. Staffing shortfalls obviously lead to increased expenses, and fundraising, as I said, is more critical than ever. So that covers about 10 to 15% of our expenses. We've got a full-time development team, full-time development director, a marketing coordinator, and a development assistant. And we've really focused on increased visibility, because it's interesting, we're world renowned in a lot of respects, but people who live down the street have no idea what Bittersweet is or what we do. So we've been trying to really get out there. We've been in the media this year. Actually, it's been a blessing. We've been in the media 65 times, I think, because the media is dying for good news stories. So we're just churning out as many good news stories as we can, and have gotten a lot of really good exposure in turn. And that does directly correlate to increased donors and donations. Our asks have become increasingly more workforce focused and less capital focused as well. So we're really trying to put the call out that, staff are our DSPs are our lifeblood, and we've seen that our supporters have been responsive. Whereas I don't think they would have been as responsive 10 years ago. They would have been more attracted to capital projects. Now they're getting behind some of our fund or our staffing challenges. The CMS settings rule. So we were identified very early on. I think in Ohio, we were right in the crosshairs. We had to do the remediation plan. We worked with the Department of Developmental Disabilities for 5 years. We had a remediation plan. We had a lot of stuff we had to do on the physical level, on our policies, on our just documentation. We have a mountain of evidence that we've built. We had to do quarterly reports to DODD every quarter for each of our locations in anticipation of CMS coming in to do heightened scrutiny, and they never did. And I was kind of like, can they just come already? Because this work, we're very confident that we're not isolating and segregating our folks. I happen to live 4 miles down the road. I see the individuals we support everywhere. I don't consider myself isolated in the community, and I don't consider them to be either. So we were confident, bring them in. But as the guidance changed and they said, basically the state could do the scrutiny and report back to CMS, DODD did give us that acceptance and that recommendation, but we have not officially heard back from CMS as to whether that was accepted. So we're cautiously optimistic. We're still very confident with our level of community participation and interaction, but it's not over till it's over. So as we have a new administration and we know that the focus may come back on this, we're paying close attention and again, appreciate all the great work that Together for Choice has done with this. Changing social norms, just briefly, tolerance and appreciation for process has changed. Distractions, cell phones. There was a period of time where we had a no cell phone policy. But as those became more, commonplace and grafted to people and, taking away their cell phones, like taking away their oxygen, we kind of conceded to just say, we should not have distractions. So we expect that we keep the ringer off. If you need to use your phone, you should step away, make sure the individuals are fully supported and that they aren't a distraction. But we've had to really adapt. We're also seeing that a lot of the workforce coming in doesn't have the prerequisite skills that we thought they would have. So we're having to train on how to do laundry, how to cook for folks, those types of things that we didn't have to train so much on before. There's more regulation and potential liability for DSPs. When I was a DSP, it was kind of like, the golden age. You had a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom and autonomy. And, people took advantage of that, which is why we have a lot of rules that we have in place today. So I don't think that they're bad, but as a DSP coming in, it's a lot more to contend with than it ever was for me 20 years ago. And then, increased autism awareness is great, but a lot of that is focused on those with, higher capabilities and skills, in the media, the good doctor, that kind of stuff. And we still have an underrepresentation of folks who are more involved, which I know you guys know fully well. So we've got to adapt and maintain our identity at the same time. We can't let go of the philosophy and the approach and the things that make us as successful and effective as we are in supporting people, but we have to also adapt. So that's been, a process. And then, the aging of our residents, many of the folks that were in their, 20s when they started here, late teens, they're in their 60s, and we've got to help them age in place. So we've got a medical team, but they're not around the clock. They're not 24/7 nursing, but that will increase as our individuals age and their medical needs increase. So we know we have to build those services. And we've got to modify our activities, our supports, our environment, everything to help people as they age. But at the same time, another area of balance is the young folks coming in who need a lot of physical activity. We still have to be able to provide that for them. So, that balance is another challenge, but one we have to meet. Pandemic disruption, we basically had to, unfortunately, kind of freeze our non-essential services in part or full, although we've tried to kind of ebb back in when it's safe to do so in some small groups. The state of Ohio has some regulations about, how many people we can have. They have to have a separate bathroom to use, separate entrance, that kind of thing, which is a little bit easier for us than other programs because of the physical space that we have. Our workforce, really, we kind of redeployed everybody to focus on essential services, COVID safety, business continuity. We did have one outbreak in the fall, pretty large outbreak, which kind of took us by surprise because we had done so well for so long. And this was kind of an asymptomatic, and we caught it with a resident through just a proactive temperature check. Luckily, everybody fared very well. We learned a lot from that. And that is, knock on wood, been our only outbreak. So everybody fared well. We've had some staff intermittently, go out with COVID or exposure. Luckily, everybody's been okay. But it's added to the hardship of being short-staffed because we're really trying to, cover each of our homes with an assigned group of staff, not having cross-staffing, cross-exposure, that kind of thing. We were able to get relief funds. We got the PPP and other relief funds, which really helped, as well as some unanticipated Bureau of Workers' comp rebates because the state of Ohio had overcharged for years. So they're giving that back now in great timing. But if we did not get those funds, then we would have been hurting much more on a financial level because we just weren't, we weren't offsetting our loss in revenue because we were maintaining our expenses labor-wise. Vaccinations are currently underway. We actually have our second day tomorrow, our clinic, and got about 95% of our residents vaccinated. Staff, we're about right around 50%. So we're trying to work on getting that up. That's pretty common with other providers, at least here in Ohio. There's some mistrust with the vaccine, and we're trying to, get there as quickly as we can without pushing too much. We're really aiming to have all of our services back online by July. That's how we budgeted as we had to do for this year. And we're cautiously optimistic that we can do that. But there's a lot of ground to cover between now and then. But vaccination is the first step. And we hope with vaccination, we can get our residents back into more of the swing of the typical traditional day program, start bringing in waves of outside participants and get back to flush with our services. So finally, opportunities on the horizon. So post-pandemic support needs, I think, are going to be profound. A lot of individuals who have not been receiving any services for a year. They're going to have a hard time, and they're going to need a lot of support. Our residents have not been, in their traditional routine for a year. We're doing a lot of stuff, but it's not the way that it used to look. So returning to baseline, people are going to need a lot of support. There's also a lot of providers that aren't making it through this. Ohio has a lot of independent providers, and a lot of them are just kind of, not going to survive this. So there's going to be more people who need supports, and I think their supports are going to be more pronounced than they were previously. I am currently trying to grow some BCBAs. As I said, I'm the only one and have been the only one at Bittersweet. We've got some students who are enrolled in getting their certification and masters in this that I'm supervising, with the intent to grow our own BCBAs because they're very hard to come by and very hard to retain, but then build a kind of clinical services team in response so that we can do ABA a little bit. We still use ABA principles, and obviously as a BCBA, I'm incorporating that, but doing that on a more formal scale. So not only can we better serve the scope of all of our participants, because, really quite frankly, what we get from the county board, who is supposed to provide that for waiver funded individuals, has been watered down in, in the framework of, that behavioral focus that I was talking about, but also open up opportunities to help people outside Bittersweet do more consultative services. And I envision being able to have our medical team having, OT, PT, speech and language, having a good comprehensive clinical team that can help impact people outside of Bittersweet. We're doing as many collaborations as possible, but there's a lot more, seems to be a lot more interest, more so than ever, in professional collaborations. We're fortunate to have some good relationships with local universities, other disability providers, and I think there's going to be a lot of great opportunity for that. And then just expanding our micro enterprises. We were able to do, down in the corner there, you can see our market space that is kind of, I apologize, I wanted a flashier picture, but right before the pandemic, we had our market space ready to go. Prior to this, we were selling all of our stuff either on Etsy or in our admin building. So this is a dedicated space that we can work on all of the component skills when it comes to, customer service, sales, stocking, inventory, all that. It houses all of the goods that we make. And we couldn't open it. It was right. We were just about to have our grand opening. So once we can hopefully get to a safe place with the pandemic soon, we'll be able to open that market space. But we also got funded a pretty good amount of money to open this mobile venture. So what our idea is that we're going to have kind of like a mobile trailer unit that's retrofitted to be a market space that we can go to areas in the community, set up shop, have our goods there, sell our cookies, and that can be mobile. So that helps us offset any scrutiny we might get for having a market space on our property, because we're also taking that out into the external community as well. And then our CSA and wholesale produce. So CSA continues to grow, I think this year especially, because getting fresh produce that's grown locally may have been harder for folks. And we've grown our CSA and our shares over time, but there's also opportunity for some wholesale produce selling, working with local restaurants, stores that we've built up. We're also trying to, in terms of collaboration, one of the things that I've been looking at doing for a little bit is growing hops for local breweries, because that's a pretty labor-intensive process that would give us a lot of good stuff to do and could be a really nice also PR, benefit in having our name out there with the craft beer boom, for example. But we're looking at a lot of different models, doing soil readings. We have a lot of untapped field space too that gives us potential to develop on as well. So that brings us to the end of everything I wanted to share, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Yeah, so a couple of questions in the chat box was asking, because I think I described Bittersweet as the first autism farm community in America. So, one of the participants is wondering if this is only exclusively to people with autism, or does this include individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities?
Good question. It is technically only for folks with a diagnosis of autism. We are not super particular about which version of the DSM that comes from, as long as somebody's got the diagnosis of autism. Depending on when they receive that, that may not be 100% accurate given today's clinical, picture, but we don't really split hairs over it. We've got individuals who, have comorbid, diagnoses as well. But yeah, that's one thing that we look for on the admission application, is that they do have an autism diagnosis.
All right. So does Bittersweet hire the teacher and paraprofessionals for your transition program, or are they school employees?
No, they are our employees. And I think that's really important to make sure that they're, we incorporate MAPS in every program that we have. So it gives us the control to be able to really teach them, train them, and hold anybody accountable that we need to implement those things.
And a question about your 14C, because you discontinued 14C, so individuals with significant disabilities, would they still be able to participate in your vocation program and be able to earn minimum wage?
Yeah, there's Ohio was aloof to some of the federal rules about the vocab program, and so we had been paying people minimum wage, and then Ohio in the last year said, "Oh, we are in violation of federal law, and we have to become compliant by this rule that individuals enrolled in that program can't make any more than half of minimum wage." So we're advocating against that because, we're not reimbursed for anything that we pay people. So, my philosophy is if we have somebody mowing a lawn and I pay them $100 or $10, that's not coming, from any government funds. So I think it's the philosophy that doesn't motivate people to move into, the pathway to employment. But we, those tiers that we have really allow us to have people, really come in and wherever they're at, so some people may start with paid work because they've got that commensurate experience and they can go right into it. But most of our folks come in not really being sure what they want to do, what they may be good at, what they may like. And so we go through that exploration and then that development. So that employment end of things, as they come out of pre-voc and that apprenticeship, that's where we start adding hours of paid work. So it may start with 1 hour a week. It may start with 5. Depending on that person. And then we're going to increase that as we go along. Again, we have to look at the implications with their, unfortunately with, how their income affects their benefits and making sure that, good intention doesn't backfire and we've got people, compromising their benefits. But it's something that seems to work for us, but I'm not 100% confident as we move into the future and Ohio starts enforcing some of this, how that's going to impact us. Because if all of a sudden we say, sorry, you were making this an hour and now you're going to make half of that, it's going to have a lot of impact, beyond just the financial piece, but I think that's going to be diminishing to, their morale as well. So it's something we're kind of trying to figure out and try to, make sure we understand and can acclimate accordingly.
Yeah. So does Medicaid also pay for the social recreation program, or is it all private pay?
It is private pay by and large, but it is also offset through grant funding. So we offer a lot of scholarships. And if we did not do that, it may, be too costly to operate, but we've been able to get a lot of community funds that enable us to provide scholarships and also offset the cost. So it's basically $25 a session, and it gives the families a great respite because it lasts for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. So it gives family the ability to go out, catch a movie, have a meal, and then know that their son or daughter is getting a really good experience as well.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not going in the order as of the questions received because I think some of them were already addressed during his presentation. So I'm going to ask a question that were not addressed yet. So do any of your staff reside at Bittersweet Farms?
No, not currently. We have overnight staff. We've talked about maybe going back into that model because we did that in the early days. So we used to have what they called house parents, and this was before my time, but they were staff that did live on the farm. And I think we had maybe 2 or 3 of those staff. So it wasn't a majority of the staff, but there were some. So we've talked about that, especially with our staffing shortages. Overnights is one of the more challenging shifts to cover, but we have not necessarily pulled the trigger on that yet.
Yeah, can you accommodate nonverbal clients or self-injurious, and how do you decide where they will work?
Yeah, so we have a lot of individuals who are nonverbal, and so we obviously focus on functional communication and building that, and meeting them wherever they're at, and then expanding upon that. So each person, we've got several individuals that use sign, but they kind of have their own version of sign too. So we have to learn their sign, their slang as we call it, and we just kind of I think it's a two-way process. We try to encourage them to expand their vocabulary and use more, universal forms of communication, while also knowing that, we've got to meet them where they're at and learn. The only way to do that is to be able to communicate with them in turn and get them there. So we learn how they communicate, we train our staff, and then we work in expanding that together. In terms of self-injurious behavior, same deal. We just, the benefits of doing some of these, the physical work, I would say, are very beneficial to those who have self-injurious behavior. Getting those endorphins out, getting that physical activity can help largely offset the need to get that release through self-injurious behavior. It doesn't eradicate it by any means. And we may have to do things that are more on the restrictive side. We're always trying to be as least restrictive as possible. We do not do any kind of restraints. We phased out restraints long before it was mandated. We do some physical assistance, maybe do some hands-on, hands-off support. We use a system called Ukeru as well that was developed by Grafton. And that is using kind of blocking techniques. But, obviously our primary focus is on prevention. But we do have a number of individuals that are self-injurious.
So, question from a father: my son is a wheelchair user and has been diagnosed with autism, cerebral palsy, and epilepsy. I know several families that have an adult child with autism and at least one other developmental disability. Would the additional disabilities disqualify them from participation at Bittersweet Farms? And in addition to that, do you have to be an Ohio resident to be able to live there?
Good question. So I'll answer the resident question first. You don't have to be a resident per se, but you have to have a funding mechanism, and usually that's going to be the waiver. So people have moved from out of state into the ICF in the early days. I don't think in my time that's happened, but particularly with the waiver, you have to have an Ohio waiver. So until waivers can transfer state lines, I think, and people have moved to Ohio throughout our history just so they can have their son or daughter attend Bittersweet. In terms of comorbid, conditions, diagnoses, it really depends. So in terms of anybody in a wheelchair, we've had a few applicants. We don't get a lot of applicants who have, mobility issues. The wheelchair is one, our farm is as ADA compliant as we can make, but it's still a farm. There's still a lot of, uneven ground and unpaved trails and that type of thing to get from one area to the other. So we have not had anybody who is needing a wheelchair for, more than just a couple weeks for some situation. That's not to say we would be against it, but our conversation would be, can this person actively participate in the program to get the benefits of everything we have to offer? We're not one to rush to conclusions to say, well, they're in a wheelchair, so that can't happen. But it is something that we would kind of talk about. Now, what we will also do, and we've done, with individuals with mobility challenges, is we just give it a week. So we'll offer the service pro bono. We'll, sign the appropriate, waivers and whatnot, but we'll just have them come in for a week and see how it goes. And that will tell us more than anything, more than looking at a piece of paper or, you know, going to do an observation where they're at. And to us, that's well worth the investment, because we see actually, it's not us just surmising what might be the case. We can see. And if we see that there's something to work with and some benefit, then we're going to move in that direction. But if we see that, hey, it's just too limiting, which one person I'm thinking of was in a wheelchair, we tried it. And I think it was probably more a lack of interest than the mobility challenges, but we're open to it. But right now we don't have anybody who you know, has that you know, situation. When it comes to other things, one of our bigger challenges is with those with you know, mental health issues, especially schizophrenia, bipolar. We serve a number of people who have those comorbidities, but they have been challenging in the sense that there aren't a whole lot of allies out there to work with on the mental health side that also understand autism. So when we do have somebody with you know, a real challenge where they need to be hospitalized, might have a psychotic episode or something, you know, the hospital's typically just saying, oh, that's just autism. This is just as autism, you know, and so it's really hard for us to kind of work in conjunction. We do have some good allies. There's one psychiatrist in our area that we work with pretty closely with our individuals, and that's been very good. But in terms of, you know, those, if there's going to be some pretty significant, you know, needs and hospitalization and things, that's a factor that we're going to talk about and make sure we can meet their needs for the long term.
Okay, do you employ RBTs as DSPs? I don't know what RBTs stand for, but I'm assuming maybe Dustin, you might know.
Yeah,
and do you provide, registered behavioral therapist. Okay, so do you provide job development and job coaching for individuals that want to pursue competitive community employment?
Good question. So we do not currently have any RBTs as staff, but this is part of the whole plan as we develop our ABA services. So once we grow our BCBAs, we then want to grow some RBTs and have a team of RBTs. So that is something that we definitely plan on doing. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
Oh, do you provide support to individuals that want to pursue community competitive employment opportunities in communities?
Yes, so we do. It's not as formalized as we would ideally like it to be. So prior to 2008, we were kind of organically doing this already. You know, as people developed looking for opportunities, you know, we had people working in the local metro park, we had people working in local businesses. And with the recession in 2008, a lot of those opportunities kind of dried up. And so we tried to, you know, then emulate those at the farm and, you know, had great success in that. But then as the, you know, push came back in recovery for this pathway to employment, we've definitely embraced it, but we kind of hand that off a little bit once we get into community employment. We haven't had a lot of individuals, you know, move on to that, but we have had some. And we're working with our team to understand that, you know, everybody theoretically is somewhat on a ladder, and we have to be, you know, and this is an important part when it comes to micro enterprises and anything that you're doing in terms of product sales and crafts and things like that, CSAs. You never want the product to sacrifice the process. So what we don't want to have is individuals sitting in the corner self-stimming and not having anything to do while we've got all the staff running like crazy to get, you know, deadlines met and products delivered and all that kind of stuff. So it's with that going into employment, we've got to more formalize kind of the traditional job coaching roles. And there's a whole billable service that we don't really tap into that we need to tap into. But the challenge has been the short staffing prevents us from being able to really go into that. So that's not to say that if we have somebody that's just mastering and they're ready and they want to move on, we facilitate that. You might have heard Mike in the video say, I work at OneSource. He is an ICF individual. We worked that out just because he was ready to move into that capacity. He wanted to, and we've got a good relationship there. So I guess in summary, we do it organically, but we need to formalize our employment services in terms of community employment and all of those things in a traditional, you know, voc rehab focus kind of deal, more so than we're doing today.
Yeah, we have a couple of more questions that we could cover. Have you ever thought of working with WWOOF, Organic Farm Volunteers, to expand your CSA enterprise? They need meals and housing, and also AmeriCorps.
No, I actually was not even really aware of that. Now, the AmeriCorps piece we've talked about. You know, I was actually right about to go into the Peace Corps right out of college. And I decided I was going to wait and just kind of go back home and see what happened. Something told me I needed to just hold off on this, and that if nothing happened, I'd go back in, because I think I was looking for an experience. And Bittersweet, I feel in hindsight, really provided what I was looking for, and which is why I fell in love with it. So we really talk about trying to maximize that again and get that kind of Peace Corps, AmeriCorps feel back to what we're doing, because that is, I think, an attractive call to the right people, the people we want working at Bittersweet. So I'm very open to working with any entity like that to you know, bring the right people in to help us offset or supplement our services or work in direct alignment with us. So I'd love to hear more about the Organic Farmer Association and all of that. But we've entertained stuff. You know, quite frankly, the last several years have been so challenging in terms of just so much going on, the challenges with staffing, that it's been hard to kind of get beyond anything that we are doing. And I think sometimes you just have to have opportunities come to you to kind of seize on. So we're open to anything on that level, but we're not really doing it right now.
Yeah, DJ Peterson asked about continuum of care in the ICF for residents as they age and their needs increase. And, you know, Dustin, I know you touched on that with the aging residents. Is there anything more that you would like to add on that presentation?
Well, you know, I think there's a lot to cover. The challenge that we have is kind of figuring out what those needs are going to be in anticipation of being able to provide them. So, you know, each person is, you know, you're going to have we're trying to keep everybody as healthy as possible. And that's why aerobic activity is also very important. But our challenge is going to be, how do we invest in our medical services in the proper timing so that we can meet everybody's need, while also not doing it to a point where it's going to be infeasible and it's going to, you know, exhaust our finances, and it's not going to be feasible. Because the medical domain is something that's also used to dictate funding. So in our ICF, we do our case mix scores. Everybody gets an individual assessment, and then we get one daily rate for everybody. So they take into account behavioral needs, daily living needs, and then also medical needs. In Ohio, you get much more money for having complex medical needs than you do for complex behavioral needs. And so, you know, that's a challenge that we have, because, you know, for some other providers, I would argue that it's easier to be in a room with 4 people who are not very mobile, who might have medical needs, versus 4 people who are, you know, Carl Lewis and need a lot of physical output. So, you know, within all of this, the challenge is that we can't necessarily capture the funding until the individuals have the medical need demonstrated through diagnosis and whatnot. So we've got to find a point where we're already investing more. We've got more nursing than we've ever had before. We've got a full-time DON, and then we've got 2 full-time nurses, and then we've got 2 med assistants who help run appointments, and then they facilitate between outside providers and our medical team. We also have a medical director, a physician that has worked with us for years, comes on site to see the individuals, works with them. He knows them, has a relationship with them. So that's a really good dynamic. And we work as a team to kind of, you know, bump up what we need to. We're always going to, you know, look at money last, but in terms of really investing in a overhaul of 24-hour, 24/7 nursing, all that kind of stuff, you know, we're going to have, I think, a more strategic plan for how we're going to do that, so that we're not behind the curve when we need it, if that makes sense. Otherwise, you know, our individuals are pretty healthy. We try to incorporate as much good eating, and, you know, that's another great benefit of the CSA is you're a lot more motivated to eat vegetables when you grew them. And, you know, we try to really get those into the houses, really incorporate them into the meals. Again, we're not restricting anybody. People want to, eat what they want to eat. But most of our individuals, I would say, are healthier in a lot of ways than their neurotypical peers. But because of their autism, because of, medication that they may have been taking through, the course of their lifetime, things like that, they're going to have unique challenges as well. So we're trying to learn about that, learn about, dementia and things as they manifest in folks with autism. And, that's just, as I said, that's one of our calls that we have to meet. So we're doing a lot better than we were, but it's going to be a journey to get there.
Okay, so we're gonna have 2 more questions and that's it. And I did type in Dustin's email if you have any more follow-up questions, but one is something that you already addressed about creating a career path for DSPs. Can you elaborate more on that part?
Yeah, I think, for DSPs don't make what they should make. It's increasingly not entry-level work compared to other entry-level positions. And, I think if there is a feeling that, okay, I'll put my work in and yet I can build a career here, then I think there's a lot more tolerance for that phase of, your career. I value that point, but I don't know how long I could have been making, at that time, I think I was making $6.25 an hour. And I don't know how long that would have been feasible before I said, I got to go do something else. I was fortunate enough to have a pathway presented to me, again, serendipitous. So we've got to make sure that we can offer that to folks. Now, that's not to say that, we've got people who have no intention of being in this field, but we sell it as a foundation that is great no matter what you're going to do. So you want to go be an insurance salesman, this will give you a really good experience and a foundation for that. You want to be a doctor, this will give you a foundation for that. So it's twofold. One is appealing to those who want to do this work, who love this type of work. And unfortunately, society doesn't value it enough to fund it to the degree that it should, right? Which you all know. So, the catch-22 we have is if we can't grow because we don't have the staff to grow, then the growth is what provides more and more career opportunity, more managers, more coordinators, more directors, more clinical staff. So we've got to find a way to kind of stop this cycle and be able to provide those opportunities, which is what that clinical services arm that I was talking about, I think holds some benefit to doing is, that does provide a clinical pathway for folks who are a little bit more clinically minded. As we get in and we work with our staff, every staff has a one-to-one with their supervisor. And what we do during that routine one-to-one is we talk about career growth. What do you want to do? Most of our staff might not even have an idea at the beginning. And so we give them experience. We try to, give them some scope so that they can start honing in. Are you more interested in administration, or are you more of a kind of clinical person? You're a program person. You want to work with the individuals. Some people are both. And we try to provide opportunities for that. So we've got different levels of positions from a DSP to a program leader or a program specialist, which then goes into a manager, which then, the next step would be a coordinator, which would then be a director. So we want to grow as many of those positions as possible so that it's not once in a blue moon that something comes up, because we don't have as much turnover in those positions as we do in the DSP positions.
Okay, one final question. Is Bittersweet Farms helping others as a consultant to develop their own models?
We've done a lot of this waxing and waning through the years. So I've talked to some of you recently and some of you in the years past. We used to do what was called Bittersweet Academy, and we offered this as kind of a formal training, and we do that at the farm, or we go to other organizations. We've worked, we've tried to help in every way we can. The challenge becomes right now the same thing. We're just so short and it's all hands on deck that we want to help, but there isn't a whole lot of opportunity to kind of get freed up from the day-to-day to be able to help. So, again, anybody who wants to reach out, I'm happy to help, but it's kind of one of those things where it just might be tough to free up the time to be able to do that in scope. So we have talked about trying to get back to some kind of offering sensibly of, some kind of consultative, service that we can provide for those who are trying to start up a program similar to ours, like we did in the past. We've just been kind of consumed with the staffing shortage and the pandemic as well. But I've, typically it's been connecting through people who just kind of, contact me through the website or other means. And, I'm happy to have a conversation. If anybody would ever want a more in-depth, consultation, we could certainly talk about that, but we don't have a structured kind of fee schedule around that or anything like that. So I'm happy to talk to anybody, but I would love to get freed up to be able to do it more and have more of our team be able to do that. It's something that's waxed and waned through the past. But I can tell you that it's only a mutual benefit for us to help every other farm-based, agricultural-based program be successful, because we're all kind of, lumped into the same perception from, policymakers and legislature. So, we're happy to help in any way. We don't have a formal offering. I'm happy to share that with Together for Choice so that can be disseminated to the membership when we have something a little more formalized. But, you've shared my email address. Please feel free to get in touch with me if you have any specific questions. Just know it may take me a little bit to get back to you.
Yeah, and for those that are in the process of creating one or starting one or entertaining the concept, if you think that you need some support in terms of the regulatory issues, because many states view farmsteads or any disability-specific settings to be isolating, we, Together for Choice, would be happy to get involved because, that's basically our mission, to make sure that all settings should be made available for those that require those type of settings. So one last question that I actually missed is how do you operate at this point in the single-digit weather?
That's a good question. So we have to be very planful. So we're typically planning the season before for the season ahead. So by this time, we've kind of cycled so much that we have kind of a standard curriculum for the winter and the inclement weather where we have to bring things inside. So right now under the pandemic, we're kind of doing things in the home and then kind of, small groups going out and taking care of the animals. The CSA are kind of our primary areas, but like art and culinary has kind of been taking place in the homes. But on our typical year, yeah, we still operate. We may close our day program if it's below zero. But we still have to provide something for our residents. So in effect, we'll be providing day services for them. If roads are closed, and people have a way to get to our location, we still provide the service. So we typically really don't shut down unless it's really, really bad, but we have a lot of outer buildings too. So we're able to get inside, they're heated, and we just kind of take it as it comes, but we have to be very planful. We can't just kind of wing it when that happens. So there's a lot of things that are just designated as indoor activities that help supplement what we're doing. So in CSA and horticulture, it may be taking our plant labels and wiping them off and writing the new plant that we're going to be planting and having those ready to go. It may be cleaning out our little cedars. It could, in art, it could be organizing the art supplies, even though that's always indoors. But, we're always looking, there's stuff that's designated for indoor activity.
Right. Well, thank you, Dustin. I know we went way over our time limits. I really appreciate your time, and I know how busy you are right now, but this was so helpful and informative, and I'm sure our members will appreciate. And we recorded this video through Facebook, so we will paste the link on our webpage with the link to the Facebook video, so you can access this video at any given time. And oftentimes we have members accessing this video a lot more than live because everyone's so busy every day. But we really appreciate your sharing everything about Bittersweet. I'm sure there's so much more to learn. So we look forward to having you back and having continued this conversation about the importance of farmstead for individuals with developmental disabilities.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. It was great to talk with you.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Stay safe.
Take care.
And more. Bye.